Very important. Oh, that's a good question. That is. It's very important that people that have questions here in the West, you try and seek advice from ulama in the West. I think that is very important. People get fatwa from ulama sitting in, let's say, sitting in the Hijaz, sitting in Saudi Arabia, and sitting in, completely or somewhere else that might not have any acquaintance with what's going on here, and they will say, okay, this is halal or this is haram, based upon their understanding of where they've lived their entire life, and you've lived a completely different life here, lifestyle. So it's very important you do. Keep in touch with ulama or get fatwa, try and get fatwa from where you are. I mean, obviously you can get it from other places as well. This, I suppose, one of the problems with going online sometimes and doing so, even though going online can be helpful, but I suppose you get it from anywhere, everywhere, and it could be very confusing. So yeah, inshallah. In the science of hadith, if one hadith is identical to the other one, but there's one word in it that is slightly different in it. So let's just say one hadith said, it's just, let's say it's got dua and it says, you got dua like Rabbana lakal hamd. Let's say, the Prophet saying, when you get up, say Rabbana lakal hamd. And another hadith says, say Rabbana walakal hamd. These will count as two hadiths. But if you're talking not about this, you're talking about the actual. I mean, I've heard numbers like around 50,000 people have said, when I've sat in hadith durus, people have said there are around 50,000 hadith. I know that the Musnad of Imam Ahmad has in it up to 40,000 hadith, of which 10,000 approximately are repetition, and about 30,000 of them are non-repetitive. Abu Dawud, I think. Starting with Bukhari. Bukhari has about 8,000 hadith in it. But obviously, these books will probably have similar type of hadith. So what you're finding here, you're probably finding there. Muslim has about 12,000 hadith in it. They can. But I mean, I've heard this number. Allahu a'lam. I mean, otherwise there can be thousands and thousands. There could be 100,000. They used to say a hafidh of hadith was somebody who knew at least 100,000 hadith. Now, that 100,000 would be with one word different, with one name different in the chain. It would count as a separate hadith. Do you see what I mean? So,
is there anything we should be wary about when we're looking at hadith books? Are there dodgy translations out there or equivalent?
It is important to keep a connection with hadith, but it's also important to learn your fiqh. Okay, do not get confused in thinking I will learn my fiqh by picking up a hadith book and going through that, because do keep your connection with hadith though. Read hadith and try and understand, but learn fiqh. It is an unbroken chain we have from teacher to student, from student to teacher to teacher to teacher, going right back to the Messenger of Allah.
You say fiqh is more important to learn?
No, I'm not saying fiqh is a khulasa. It is a summary of hadith and Qur'an. It's not, fiqh is not something, it is what, you've kind of like filtered Qur'an, hadith, and you've taken out all these rulings of it, and that is fiqh. It's not something to put in contrast to, it's not a contradiction with hadith. Do you see what I mean? So I think it would be, if somebody said that, once again you're borderline and things like blasphemy to say, stuff like fiqh is. Sorry.
What do you think if you ask an example, if we book a tuition, and we ask one question, same question to all of them, and someone saying to you an example, give you hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, same story about it, is to me is enough to understand it. And you ask several other shaykh, same question, will say to you similar things but little bit different. The third one will be said different as well. Between all of them, it will be little bit different. In that position, us as a young Muslim person, studying al-Sharia, what you do is this?
You see, look, the thing is, you will get different rulings. This way you have different schools of thought. I just want to clarify something. Schools of thought are not sects. Okay, I'm sure everybody here does know that, but I have to say that just again. School of thought is not a sect. Okay, it is an way of understanding something. I mean, if we're just looking at this cup right here, we are all looking at it from a different angle. Nobody in this room has the exact same image of that cup. because you're seeing it from a slightly different angle, that's all. But yet none of us are wrong in what we're seeing. Now that is what it's like with the words of the Prophet, with the light of the Sharia. The companions, they all looked at it and they took it in and they absorbed it, but perhaps it was their understanding, their angle on it. Now it's not, you see, so schools of thought are not sects. Secondly, the best way to learn your Sharia is to get through your basic ibadat and things like this. And I would say the best way to do that is you find a shaykh, or you go to a place where there's teaching and learning, and you go through a particular school of thought. There is no... See, people become very intimidated in submitting to a school of thought. Like, they think a school of thought is like, oh, is it like a cult or something? It's not. It is inconceivable that you will learn your ibadat, that you will learn how to worship. It is inconceivable without going through a particular school of thought. There is no way. I mean, I pose this question time after time. I ask people that challenge schools of thought, show me or tell me, how can I, or any individual, learn how to worship without going through a school of thought? Please show me, because I remain intrigued. I mean, I don't understand how that is possible. So you go through. It's not a sect whatsoever. It's the understanding passed down through obviously scholars going back to a particular region, usually with certain companions that resided there, and their understanding of how the Prophet taught. It's not. Obviously, in which school a person chooses, Qadi Iyad, he writes in the Tartib al-Madarik that, look, listen, a person can choose any school. He can even base it upon just the virtues of that imam. Like, he could say, I just like this imam for some reason. Now, obviously, out of all the 4 imams we have today, there's one of them who's absolutely undisputed in his hadith and fiqh, is the Imam of Dar al-Hijrah, Imam Malik. And so, obviously, he's from the only 4 who has nobody challenges Imam Malik, not on his fiqh, not on his hadith. He's out of the on. I'm not saying the others are amazing as well, but let's just say Abu Hanifa, some people have criticised for hadith, Shafi'i, some people criticised for hadith, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, some people criticised for fiqh. But Imam Malik was one that they all held in consensus that, is absolutely up there. And actually, and this is interesting, every school of thought has as their principle that if we can't find the answer in our madhab, we go to the madhab of Malik for second. And every school of thought, apart from obviously the Malikis, because they've got it anyway. But every other school has that. So it's very interesting. But look into it. Start reading about Imam Malik. Start reading about the Salaf, or what were the people in Medina like. And just remember one thing: this is not. And because some people have seriously, it's a big mistake. They feel that by submitting to it, is this cultish, or is this a sect?
Someone said to me, I want to get the best from all the madhabs, I'll take the pieces myself. In effect, in the frame of mind, they're somehow missing things out if they don't follow all of them.
You see, if a person took that approach, I'm not... You see, okay, this is my understanding now, yeah? I'm giving my understanding of the Sharia. And, people may challenge this. I don't personally feel that a person is sinful if they refuse to follow madhab. I don't personally believe that, okay? I don't think they're sinful. That's my understanding. I do feel it's recommended, it's good to follow a school of thought. I don't feel it's fard. However,